Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 26th episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. With Oppenheimer only a few months away from its release, I thought, why not do Christopher Nolan Ranked today? Christopher Nolan is one of the most visually striking filmmakers we've ever had, showcasing his talents with grand spectacles of practical effects and thrilling nonlinear storytelling. Christopher Nolan has been considered one of the best directors of the 21st century. I will discuss my personal thoughts on him and his filmmaking style towards the end. Whether or not you agree he is one of the best, he without a doubt has brought us some of the biggest and most talked about films in the last 20 years. Before I even get into this, let me warn the deep Nolan fans my list is going to make you upset. I'll explain why I put each film where I did, but remember, people, this is one guy's opinion. This list will have all 11 of Nolan's films in it. So let's get into Christopher Nolan Ranked. Number 11, Tenet, 2020. Tenet was victim to the thing that, kind of changed life forever. It was delayed several times due to it, and its box office definitely suffered because of it, despite being the fifth highest grossing film of the year. The movie follows a former CIA agent who figures out how to change the flow of time in order to prevent a future attack on the current world. I was super excited for this movie. Like when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh my God, this is going to be so good. It looked insane. You got Nolan, John David Washington, Robert Pattinson. What could go wrong? Well, the main issue with this film is it is rather confusing upon the first watch, which can be off putting. It ran at least 30 minutes too long, and I felt out of Nolan's original stories, it was one of his weakest. Having said that, this movie is saved with some gorgeous cinematography, a cool, haunting score, and some brilliant performances from its leads. You can tell everyone bought in, and it shows. In the hands of a lesser director, this movie could have been a complete disaster, but Nolan still manages to bring us something worth watching, even if it's just once. Overall, I will give Tenet a 6.3 out of 10. Number 10, The Dark Knight Rises, 2012. The final installment of Nolan's acclaimed Batman trilogy ends on a good note, but it really just misses the beat of the previous two installments. With that said, this, by any stretch, is not a bad movie. It's entertaining, action packed, and is a satisfying yet basic conclusion to maybe the best hero trilogy of all time. The movie just didn't do anything new for the series or the genre like the first two did. We got some brilliant performances from Bale, Hardy, Hathaway, Gordon Levitt, Freeman, and Oldman, some great direction, and another great composition from the great Hans Zimmer. The movie's issue is it just feels like another hero film other than a game changer like the last two. It's a basic formula. It's just got that Nolan style and flair we all love. Nolan did the least Nolan thing here and took virtually zero risk in the making of this film. He was hesitant on making it to begin with, and you can tell in its execution. Overall, I will give The Dark Knight Rises a 6.7 out of 10. Number 9, Dunkirk, 2017. All right, stop. Okay, I'm sure a bunch of y'all are ready to click off this video, but just hear me out. Welcome a new opinion and don't let your personal tastes cloud your mind from new perspectives. I am aware how beloved this movie is, and I understand why people do love it, and there are quite a few things to admire about it, and let's start with those. First of all, this is one of the most beautiful movies I've laid my eyes on. The colors in this movie are crisp and vivid. It's edited so smoothly, and the sound of this movie makes you feel like you are in the war. I can go on and on about the camera work, dogfights, and cinematography. But guys, anyone who has watched a few of my videos and heard my takes on films knows to wow me, it takes far more than visual effects. I'm a sucker for a story and character development, and there is very little of that in this film. The film shows the evacuation of Dunkirk during World War II from land, air, and sea. I respect that Nolan focused on this part of the war because Normandy is getting a bit tired, and he kind of took the opposite approach of most war movies, focused on just that, the war. Outside of the arc with Dawson, his son Peter, and their helping hand George, there isn't much to be said about any of these characters in the movie. With war films, I think character development is crucial to a lot of the plot. Because war changes you as a person, your perspectives, and most of all, your mental state. With Dunkirk, we don't get very much of this, just moments of intense situations that ultimately lead to nothing. Having said all of that, I do not think Nolan was trying to pull on our heartstrings, nor make us feel any type of way about these characters. In fact, I think he wanted us void of emotion to the characters and wanted us fully immersed in the evacuation and the sequences of war. This is a clear case of spectacle on display. This wasn't meant to invoke visceral feeling in the user. This movie fully supports Nolan's thoughts on IMAX and the importance of sound, visual, and the in theater experience. I enjoyed Dunkirk, just didn't grab me in like my favorite war films have over time. Overall, I will give Dunkirk a 7 out of 10. Number 8, Insomnia, 2002. Nolan's film to show the studios, hey, I can play the game. I can make a straightforward movie with a linear story, simple tropes, and big name actors. Although that sounds pretty stiff and stale, this movie isn't either of those words. Insomnia follows Al Pacino, who plays an LA detective who is sent to investigate a murder case in Alaska. He starts to unravel after an accidental shooting and suffering from lack of sleep. There isn't anything new going on in this movie. He didn't write this, so it is missing some of Nolan's signatures, but it is well directed, well acted, and looks beautiful. Nolan's regular, Wally Pfister, brought some of his most underrated cinematography with some of the craziest shots of the mountains and trees around. Nolan with this movie proved he can make a standard type of thriller film that still is an above average film that still holds up 20 years later. This may be Nolan's least talked about film, but it doesn't mean it isn't good. Williams and Pacino are brilliant in this film, and it is a very nice story that struggles with the moral dilemmas that come with being in law enforcement. Overall, I will give Insomnia a 7.2 out of 10. Number 7. Following 1998. Christopher's first film was actually a baby masterpiece. This movie, although extremely minimal in comparison on what was to come in his future, is quite well written, directed, acted, and edited. It follows a young British man who follows people in the intention on gaining inspiration as a writer, but gets pulled into the criminal underworld when failing to keep his distance. This movie shows us what was to come of Nolan. It reminds me of Reservoir Dogs, Hard Eight, and Mean Streets. It's got that gritty first film feel, shot in black and white, and clocking in at only 70 minutes, Nolan serves us up a twist-filled crime noir that laid the blueprint for his career. If you've seen this movie, Memento will make a lot more sense to you, at least in the way he plays with time and his storytelling. This writing style will be prevalent in his other films to come. Overall, I will give Following a 7.4 out of 10. I am fully prepared to have myself eliminated in the comments for this, but number 6, The Dark Knight, 2008. Just like with Dunkirk, hear me out before you click this off. First thing is first, I will acknowledge that this is easily one of the best hero films ever made, okay? So let's make that clear and get that out of the way. One thing about this film is that it is placing me slightly in the bias category. I've seen this movie far more times than I ever wanted to. I saw it in theaters 3 times in the span of 2 weeks. Only one of them I wanted to. I just ended up hanging out with people that whole summer that wanted to see it. They paid, so I went. Then, when it came out on DVD that day, I ended up hanging out with 3 groups of people who all put it on as soon as I got to them. I saw it all by accident. Then, Later on in life, I ended up working at Blockbuster as a teen, and my manager's favorite movie was none other than The Dark Knight. So this man would play this movie twice a day every time I worked. So, this is one of those movies I've seen way too many times. Even though I have this movie at number 6, this movie has one of the best performances of the century with Heath Ledger's Joker. He melted into this role, leaving us with one of the most memorable performances we've ever seen. His death hit us all, and because of that, this movie will always have a special place in everyone's heart. Nolan combined elements of crime noir and took inspiration from films like Heat, and it shows all over this film. He somehow expanded on the world created in Batman Begins and extended the story to the next level with some very careful and creative writing. I just personally don't connect with this movie as much as others. I understand the love and how it makes people feel. It is one of the freshest takes on Batman we've seen and likely will never be topped as far as the originality in a film with these characters we've seen so many times. This film was crucial in the way we consume and make hero films today. This film, along with Batman Begins, set the standard for what it takes to make a good hero film. The MCU can thank Nolan for laying down the blueprint. Now, I'm going to give this movie 2 scores because I feel that is only fair with a film of this caliber. On a personal level, overall, I will give The Dark Knight a 7.8 out of 10. But in a general score, and for what it's done for cinema in the genre, I have to pay this film its respect, and I will give it a 9.2 out of 10. Guys, let's take a quick intermission before we get to the top 5. Guys, do me a solid, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Help me grow. I enjoy making these videos for you guys, and I just want to help them reach a larger audience. Now, I'm going to give a streaming recommendation today. Hear me out. This is a bit of a different film. Now, although I'm talking about a mainstream director like Nolan, my all-time favorite films are some that most people have never seen. I'd like to challenge anyone watching this. Check out a film called Fanny and Alexander. It's a Swedish film from 1982 directed by Ingmar Bergman. He is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, and this film is an absolute masterpiece. I challenge you guys to maybe try something new. Check this movie out. It's 3 hours long, and it's theatrical cut, but I'm telling you, it is all worth it. World cinema is extremely important, guys, and this classic is streaming on HBO Max. Now, let's get back into the content. Number 5, Interstellar, 2014. Christopher dove headfirst into this sci-fi world, giving us one of the most visually stunning and emotionally gripping films of the decade. This is the only Nolan movie to put tears in my eyes, and I did think he would never do that as a director. This movie is a dystopian world that is losing resources, where a group of astronauts try and find a new world by traveling through wormholes. I guess this film is quite accurate in its science portrayed here. I'm not a scientist, I'm a guy who talks about movies. Matthew McConaughey and Jessica Chastain give some great heartfelt performances, while we get one of the most evil portrayals of Matt Damon we've ever seen. Everything about this movie, on a filmmaking standpoint, is a step towards the advancement of how films look. Visually speaking, this is 2001 of its time. The way Nolan makes this movie look on a certain planets is mind-blowing. The way he plays with time and wormholes are some of the most interesting takes on them, even if it comes off a bit cheesy and unrealistic at times. Ain't none of us been to space, so what can we really say about it? His imagination is on full display here, and trust me, it runs deep. The relationship he created between Cooper and Murph is one of the best on-screen relationships we've had from him. They will bring you to tears. Overall, I will give Interstellar an 8.2 out of 10. Number 4, The Prestige, 2006. This one was really close to making the top 3, but I had to put it here at 4. This movie here is the reason I love movies. You can take something I have absolutely zero interest in and make me actually give a damn about it and fully invest me in it. That's what great filmmaking is, and this movie here has everything a great film should have in it. The Prestige is a tale about two magicians who are literally in some of the most intense competition with each other. I will leave it at that because if you haven't seen it, I would actually suggest this movie on this list more than any other of Nolan's films. Magic and the world of it has never been so interesting, and its dark, gritty, fun, and ruthless world that is filled with signature Nolan time jumps, twists, and the most important, the visuals. Nolan was meant to make this film and was even chosen to adapt it from its source material over the great Sam Mendes, who had an Oscar win. Nolan was the right choice. Nolan is a metaphorical magician in the way he makes his films and tricks and illusions he uses with the camera play all over this movie and proves him as a master filmmaker. Just watch this classic to understand the literal magic of the man's films. And let's have a quick moment for the GOAT, Christian Bale, who absolutely melts into this role, giving us one of the best and most underrated characters of all time. He is the real show stealer in this movie, and he usually is. Overall, I will give The Prestige a 9.1 out of 10. Number 3, Batman Begins, 2005. So look, if you've been watching, you already knew this was going to be before The Dark Knight. Hear me out. Batman Begins changed the hero genre forever. It came before The Dark Knight, and it needed this movie in order to be born. Think of how Terminator 2 needs the first one in order for it to have that effect and weight. Same deal here, but this movie is slick, beautiful, and a dope look at Bruce Wayne more than Batman. We see the brilliantly crafted origin story Nolan gives us with one of the most unique and original takes on this, making Batman his most developed character over 3 films. We understand his motivations and why he is who he is and feels like he has to be who he's aspiring to be. We have never seen style like this in a hero film, mixing martial arts, emotion, fun, and a thrilling setting to tell one of the most unique Batman stories ever put to screen. This movie locks you in and takes you on a fun, gritty ride with Christian Bale as he transforms into the best detective the world has ever seen. Big shouts to Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, and Nolan has finally given him that leading role he's been longing for in Oppenheimer. This movie helped bring comic book films back to the forefront, and now look where we are. Overall, I will give Batman Begins a 9.2 out of 10. Number 2, Memento, 2000. Always remember Sammy Jenkins. OG Nolan fans will get why I got this movie here and will appreciate it. This simple yet layered and complex story follows a man who is suffering from short-term memory loss while trying to find his wife's killer. Kind of like Following, this is a simple noir crime film that takes a regular guy down the rabbit hole of the criminal underworld. This is one of the best screenplays of the 2000s. Nolan followed up his indie with some great style and direction and showed studios he was a real filmmaker here to stay. He showed off his signature time play and mixed in black and white and color to tell the story. You get great performances from Guy Pearce, Carrie-Anne Moss, and Joe Pantoliano. This is a film meant to be viewed more than once, and with each watch, you'll understand it more and more, and it actually makes a lot of sense. Overall, I will give Memento a 9.3 out of 10. Before I reveal number 1, I wanted to share my thoughts on Nolan. Nolan for me is one of the greatest directors of all time, but he isn't one of my personal favorites. I had him at number 10 in my top 10 best directors of all time. I think he is a genius and one of the modern pioneers of filmmaking, and I appreciate and respect him so much for what he's done. His use of practical effects and the push for the preservation and advancement of films is something we need, especially after the lockdown. His writing is pretty good, but I do think he often lacks in character development, even though he can make interesting characters. I myself love action and big spectacle movies like his most popular films, but I think he is best with his intimate films and relatable characters. Where he shines is really in what he can do visually. His mind works like a machine. In a way, he kind of reminds me of George Lucas. I could easily see him stepping away from the director's seat to solely work on visual and sound effects. He has a mechanical mind and one that works differently than your average person. With all that said, process of elimination, number one, Inception, 2010. Good old Inception. It's one of the coolest and most stylized sci-fi films ever made. Drawing inspiration from films like Paprika, Nolan took a bunch of ideas, blending them into something insane. If you've seen Paprika, 2006, directed by Satoshi Kon, then you know exactly where Nolan got a lot of ideas and the themes for this film. He took some of the stuff from the movie and put his own twist on it and created a heist movie involving dreams, and it ran like a movie production team. This ensemble cast, led by Leo DiCap, all plays their roles to perfection, and this movie is a pure adrenaline rush from start to finish. We get some of Nolan's best practical effects and action mixed with some of his best character development. Leo helped craft the character, and I think that was necessary for the film to give us something and someone to root for. All of that makes one of the most fun and well-rounded movies of the 2010s and one of the best sci-fi films of the century. Everyone has seen this by now, so I don't need to talk your ear off about it. But we all love that nice ambiguous ending. Overall, I will give Inception a 9.5 out of 10. Guys, thank you for watching Christopher Nolan Ranked. As always, let me know your ranking in the comments below. I'm sure a lot of you have issues with where I put some of these films, so go ahead and rip me apart in these comments. Guys, make sure you please like and subscribe to the channel. We got some great stuff coming here in the coming weeks. I'll see you guys next week, and don't forget the popcorn.